Hi and welcome to today's vlog. Now, I've had a communication from a friend of ours called John. John lives here in Doncaster, but like many of our Doncaster friends, we haven't had opportunity to meet up because of this coronavirus and restrictions on where you can go, who you can see. But John sent me a message and asked whether I can make the volume of these vlogs a bit higher so you can hear better. No idea how to do that other than to speak louder. The problem is that another friend of ours from here in Doncaster, Sue, told me yesterday that when she listens to my vlogs, she has to turn the volume down. So I'm not sure whether to turn it up or to turn it down, to speak louder or to speak softer. But maybe you can work on your own devices to turn it up or down. Hopefully that is the case. Well, today's vlog has a bit of a horticultural or gardening theme. My dad, in his early working life, worked as a gardener. He worked in a number of different places, in one of which was the place that is now base home for the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. Some of you may well have been there. It's a lovely place, and for a time, Mum and Dad and my 4 elder sisters lived there. Unfortunately, they moved before I was born, so I never had the privilege of living in that beautiful little area, or big rolling hills and trees and all sorts of beautiful vegetation. But anyway, in a sense, that's beside the point. But so my dad was a gardener in his early working life. He didn't really pass on his green fingers to me. In fact, when Sue and I got married, for the first few times we moved home, Dad would very soon after we moved in come and it seemed in a very short while sort out the garden so it looked beautiful. So I've never had his skill with the garden, never been able to learn the plant names like he knew. But since we've been retired, I've really enjoyed opportunities to work in the garden. And one of the blessings of being working in the garden is that when you work in the garden, spend an hour or half an hour, you can usually see what you've done, whether you've weeded somewhere or dug somewhere over. Whereas when I was a church leader, often you would be working during perhaps a day's work, and you wonder what is the practical outcome of that day. Sometimes you didn't really know. Unlike if you're in the garden, you know exactly what you've done. You can see the product of that. Jesus often he was always using illustrations from the world around him, wasn't he, to help people understand the things of God. And sometimes he would use the world of nature. He talks about the birds of the air, the flowers of the field, a farmer going out to sow, and perhaps other stories as well. Well, a little bit of update on what we've been doing in our garden. First of all, I bought some 3 different rhubarb plants, different varieties, and they are now in the raised bed. Obviously, won't see anything really happening with them until the new year. Now, the problem is, or the issue is, that it's always suggested when you plant rhubarb that in the first year of the rhubarb's growth, when it might produce nice stalks and they look really nice and juicy and you want to pull them and eat them, but all the advice is in the first year, don't pull the stalks, just leave them so that can feed strength and growth for future years back into the plant itself. So you've got to learn patience. And there's a verse in Psalm 40 which talks all about the need for patience. The psalmist says this: I waited patiently for the Lord to help me, and he turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. He has given me a new song to sing, a hymn of praise to our God. So the psalmist, like we all have to do at times, learned patience. Sometimes we cry out to God, we ask God to work in a situation, to help us. And sometimes the response seems delayed. We've got to learn patience to trust God's timing. Another example of that is also bought an archway for the garden. It's in the back garden now. It's a metal archway, and I've planted on one side of that a wisteria plant. When we lived in Doncaster, our neighbours across the road had a lovely wisteria that went right across the front of their property, and it's just beautiful in the times of the year when it bloomed. And I'm hoping that in sometime in the future that wisteria will grow and go over the archway, and it'll look beautiful when we look out from our bedroom window. Of course, again, we'll have to learn patience as that grows. Hopefully it will in due course produce the required benefit. The third thing about the garden is that we've actually ordered a summer house. One of my sisters said to me, well, you won't be spending much time in it anytime soon. But the good news is that it's not coming this year. It'll come perhaps springtime next year. So hopefully we're ready for next year's wonderful summer weather. So we're looking forward to that. But we will wait and it will arrive. So all these three things, the summer house, the archway with the wisteria, and the rhubarb, are all things that we've done now, or we've instigated now, but the real benefit, the fruit, the blessing will come at some time in the future. And we do make plans, don't we, for the future, although maybe it's a bit more difficult in these COVID times when things are a bit uncertain, but we make plans. But I want to share two almost opposite elements of that whole thing about making our own plans. And the one is the danger of doing so. Listen to these words from the letter of James. Look here, you people who say, today or tomorrow we're going to a certain town and we'll stay there a year, we'll do business there, we'll make a profit. How do you know what will happen tomorrow? For your life is like the morning fog. It's here a little while and then it's gone. What you ought to say is, if the Lord wants us to, we will live and do this or that. And of course, that's the reality, isn't it? We can make all our plans, but we don't know whether they will come to fruition. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, health-wise or in many other ways. So if we make our own plans and forget to involve God in our plans, to ask God's guidance for the future, then we can fall into a big trap, because we can make our plans and then things can change totally. I was talking with a friend recently about holidays, and how do you plan holidays when we don't know what's happening with coronavirus, etc. So we need to be open to God's way, seek God's instruction for the future, and work out our plans as we listen to what God is saying to us. So there is a warning about making plans, but on the other hand, it can be a very positive thing. I was listening to watching Gardener's World recently. On one episode, there was an interview with Kate Garraway. Kate Garraway is a TV presenter, and you may well know that her husband Derek contracted coronavirus, COVID-19, in the early days of the epidemic, and he's still very seriously ill. They don't know whether he'll recover, how things will be. But there's a picture of her in her garden with her two children, and they were planting, whether the bulbs or some sort of plants. And she said that for them as a family, with their husband, their dad, uncertain about his future, for them planting was a sign of hope for the future, because the fruit of their work will come in future days. So they were planting as a sign of hope, and that was linked to their hope that Derek Garraway would would make a full recovery and return to be with his family. So I pray that their hope that will come to fruition, that Derek will recover and be returned to his family. And that message of hope is one that's desperately needed in our world today. It's a difficult time, and many are struggling, but we have a hope in Christ Jesus. And I come back to that wonderful, more recent hymn that has caught the imagination, the love of many. In Christ alone, my hope is found. So in these strange times, in these uncertain times, in these times when many of the things we once thought seemed to be so secure are shaking, we have a hope, a steadfast hope, a rock beneath our feet, our hope in Christ Jesus. So God bless you. Thank you so much for listening today. May you find and know that certainty, that hope that is in Christ Jesus.